Down through the millennia, cultures across the world have attached importance to astronomical movements, using them to predict terrestrial events from celestial observations. From individual life events such as marriage and careers to the election of leaders, astrology has played an important role in people's decision-making.
Western astrology, one of the oldest astrological systems still in use, can trace its roots to ancient Mesopotamia, from which it spread to Greece, Rome, the Arab world, and eventually Central and Western Europe. But can astrology really predict world events and provide guidance in daily life? Or is it just vague assertions combined with confirmation bias making people believe that it works? That's what we set out to uncover in this episode of
Is That For Real?
Perfect.
Well, there's a little background for you. But is astrology for real, or is it just like some vague, generic advice that kind of applies to everybody enough of the time for people to think it's real? What do you think, Deasis? Do you believe in astrology?
Yes, I do.
You do?
Yes, I do. More than not, yes, I do.
More than not. What do you mean by that?
Okay, granted, it seems to have some inconsistencies, and to be fair to the skeptics, some of the people in the zodiac sign that they're born in don't act quite like it, but that's just because they haven't evolved to that point.
Oh, okay. I got you. Now, to that point, we have a guest that's coming on for an interview in this show who really has a good explanation for why it is that sometimes people don't seem to fit the description of their sign, and we'll save that for let her explain it. But I didn't know this, so this is a very interesting piece of information that she gave us that I think you're going to appreciate once we get to that. But a lot of people believe in astrology. There's a lot of people that do. So let's play a quick segment that talks about some studies and polls and just how popular this is. A 2005 Gallup poll showed that 25% of Americans believe in astrology. And according to a Harris poll in 2009, 26% of Americans believe in astrology. Research conducted amongst a sample of students in England found that 100% know their star sign, 70% read their horoscopes regularly, and 85% agree that the description of their birth sign describes their personality. In India, there is a long-established and widespread belief in astrology. It is commonly used for daily life, particularly in matters concerning marriage and career. In February of 2011, the Bombay High Court reaffirmed astrology's standing in India when it dismissed a case that challenged its status as a science.
25%? 25%, that's it?
Well, 25% are like hardcore believers.
Okay.
There are larger numbers in other studies I saw where people think it may have some legitimacy. And like that one study showed from England, the English students, lots of people know their star sign and agree that their sign describes their personality. But that's not a hardcore belief, except for India. India, we're talking 1.2 billion people, I think it is.
Yeah.
It
Pretty
is
much half the planet.
Yeah, it is very much a part of their daily life. They make decisions based off it. They elect leaders based off of it. They choose jobs and marriage mates based off of it.
What do you believe if you don't believe in that?
Well, a lot of people just think that it's baloney. Like the stars don't have any impact on people. They just don't think it does.
That's people who don't know about it.
Well, there's some good skeptical reasons for doubting it, but there's also some very interesting evidence for this one that I did not know when we first started to do the research that really surprised me, that got me scratching just a little bit, wondering about it. So let's go ahead, because that's a good segue into the first line of evidence that astrology is something that people should take seriously. So let's go ahead and roll that, and then we'll talk about it in a little bit more detail.
Throughout most of its history, astrology was considered a scholarly tradition and was common in academic circles, often in close relation with astronomy, alchemy, meteorology, and medicine. It's an ancient belief dating back thousands of years, with lunar cycles being marked on cave walls as far back as 25,000 years.
The belief in astrology spans the globe in various forms, including Hindu astrology, Chinese astrology, Hellenistic astrology, Babylonian astrology, Islamic and Arabic astrology, and so on. If there is no evidence that astrology is real, why has it been so accepted for so long and by so many people? So like with our other shows so far, this belief is ancient. Now, the actual belief in astrology as a science, because it was considered among the sciences, astronomy, alchemy, meteorology, medicine, for thousands of years, that actually started roughly 3,000 years ago. But people keeping track of the lunar cycles in cave markings go back as far as 25,000 years. And that begs the question, well, people have been believing this and seeing evidence of this for this long. There's got to be something to it. And just like with ghosts, just like with psychics, just like with shadow people, the other things we've covered. What do you think about that?
This is one of the few things that makes me not go full-blown atheist. I'm an agnostic, somewhat pantheistic in my views. As old as this is, and it's still very valid in today's society, because there is a lot of truth or shreds of truth in it. And that's why we can't just completely wipe it off the table like other pseudosciences that have vanished throughout the decades. It makes me wonder, how did they get this kind of intelligence? Where did it come from? Where did we come from? And, like I said, this is one of the things that still makes me lean towards agnostic instead of atheist, and just writing it all off together and saying, okay, yeah, evolution, because it explains people and the universe pretty well.
I can definitely see how, as someone who leans toward pantheism, and in case you don't know what that is, a pantheist is someone who believes that the universe is God. Like there's not some other God, it is God, like in its whole.
As they say, the universe speaks to us. That's
and it would make sense, being a pantheist, that you would think that the universe, the stars, all that would have some kind of controlling effect on people. Now, the skeptics view it as pseudoscience, so I'm glad you used that phrase.
Yeah.
Whereas in the past, it was considered a scientific discipline. After the scientific method came out, that view started to change. It started to fall out of favor in academic circles, and we'll talk about why when we get to the skeptic side. But I will give astrology this. Most of the people I know, not everybody, but most of the people I know, when you read the description of their sign for when they were born, it may not be completely accurate, but they do seem like they do fit the description. You definitely fit a Leo.
I mean, and
Capricorn.
And that's one of the things that got me into it, because I got into astrology not to know my future, but because I've always been into sociology. A lot of people that know me, they know I've always been into Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, archetypes, et cetera, color psychology. And so when I started reading into around 2013, zodiac signs, astrological signs, etc., I realized that I acted like a Leo before I even knew what a Leo was. Now, I don't know if that's because people always told me I was a Leo, or, attributed certain characteristics to me that I just fulfilled, but I acted like a Leo before I knew what a Leo was.
Yeah.
And, looking at you, yes, you do act like you're Capricorn. He's got his stuff together, articulated. grounded, down to earth. I'm wild, hedonistic, and free, and nobody controls me, or at least I try to give the impression that nobody is going to control me.
Even if you are a self-fulfilling prophecy of other people.
Maybe I am.
No. Yeah. Even if that was true, which I don't think that's true, but even if it was because other people always told you were, and so that's how you became, that absolutely is not the case for me. Because I grew up knowing zero.
Yeah.
I did not know my sign until last year because you were interested in it, and because
did I start that?
I have another friend.
Yeah, see, I'm a good influence.
You met him, Damon the singer from Dallas. Yeah. He's in it out of interest, not out of belief, but he would talk about it. So I'm like, oh, well, that's interesting. And so I went and looked up my sign. This just a couple of months ago. I'm like, fine, I'll go look it up. I'm like, well, crap. Especially the YouTube videos where they had the people who act out what the different signs act like. I'm like, that is so me right there. And then Beth, my wife, Beth, she definitely behaves and has the characteristics of the signs and all that. Now, the skeptics have something to say about that, and we'll get to it. But just based on that, it is very interesting how people do like, oh, well, he's a Virgo. Of course he acts like that. You know, it does seem to have some accuracy.
Yeah, I mean, I equate it to sociology. You know, I equate astrology or zodiac signs the same way I would equate Myers-Briggs or Enneagram. Is it completely true? Does it match everybody at all times? No. But are the generalizations usually fairly accurate, in my opinion? Yeah, I think they are. Because usually when you look at the general plethora of people born on their sign, they tend to, in my opinion, in my observations, act like their sign.
Yeah.
For the most part.
And devil's advocate here, because I'm a skeptic, but I try to be fair. No, this is in your favor. The devil's advocate side is, let's say stars have nothing to do with it. And we'll get into some of the evidence of why people do believe they absolutely do have an effect. Next, particularly the moon, there's your little, what do you call it?
Moon
foreshadowing
sign.
Of what's coming up, the moon. But even if stars, the moon, none of that has anything to do with it, when people observe people for long enough and write down what they see long enough, and they start to draw connections between when a person was born and their behavior patterns, even if those observations actually don't have anything to do with the stars, it doesn't necessarily mean the observations are untrue. So connecting people's behavior to when they were born may have some legitimacy, even if what they think is the cause, like the stars, is not. And we'll get into some of that in another evidence segment, more foreshadowing for you. So I really think that that's a good... I
can see that.
Yeah, and that's a good jump into the next line of evidence, which deals with the moon, which I find a very fascinating argument. So let's go ahead and play that, and then we'll talk about it.
It's an established fact of science that the moon's gravity has a real effect on the Earth, resulting in the ocean's tides. The human body is about 75% water, and many believe that we too are affected by the moon. One study showed that pet injuries rise between 23% and 28% during the full moon, though the study did not seek to ascertain why that was the case.
In another study, animal bites were found to have sent twice as many British people to the emergency room during full moons compared with other days. If the moon can affect animals in this way, why not humans? In fact, a small study in 2013 found that people slept less during the full moon, even when they could not see the moon and were not aware of the current lunar phase.
In 2016, research involving 5,800 children aged 9 to 11 in 12 different countries found that they slept about 5 minutes less on nights with a full moon. So that last segment's pretty interesting, because my dad has always told me that during a full moon, he can't sleep. He said, I could have the curtains drawn, I could have the blinds closed. He's like, I don't sleep worth a damn when there's a full moon outside. And I'm the same way. For some reason, and I don't know why, I have no clue why, but my sleep tends to be very broken when there's a full moon. I'll probably sleep about an hour, wake up Another hour, wake up, 45 minutes, wake up, hour and a half. It's just terrible. It's broken. I hate it. I hate it when it's a full moon.
Well, apparently you're not alone, because those studies we talked about in this segment showed that people's sleep cycles were definitely affected
I totally
by the
believe it.
moon. Which
Totally.
makes sense if people are 75% water, and no one doubts that the moon is the cause for the tidal effect on the Earth.
Yeah.
And if we're made out of water, why wouldn't it have an impact on people too? So I definitely get
It's true.
that. And the other part that I thought was really interesting was pet injuries going up. I mean, what's up with that?
Really?
23 to 28% more injuries that pets are brought to the vet for during a full moon. And they say that people go crazy and animals go a little crazier during the full moon. And I don't know,
Everything
maybe that's,
goes crazy.
maybe that's what they're getting at. But that study didn't actually try to figure out why it happened, just made the correlation that it happened. So crazy stuff happens when the moon gets large.
Yeah, and people even tell you not to go out during a full moon sometimes.
Yeah.
Some people be like, hey, it's full moon. And,
Yeah,
and
no,
just, you might just want to stay in.
Yep. Crazy people
Yeah,
go out
cray,
on the full
cray.
moon, yeah. So who knows? There's a reasonable, logical principle behind it. If the moon affects the tides and we're made out of water mostly,
Right.
why wouldn't it affect us too? And there's some studies to back up the fact that it does.
I mean, that makes sense. Who's to say that unknown forces that we have not discovered yet are affecting us in ways that we don't yet know?
Sure.
Because it seems like the moon affects a lot of things. Who's to say it can't affect us not only physically, but also emotionally?
There's no reason why. Yeah. If there is an actual effect on the chemistry of the brain or whatever, it wouldn't. And the moon being our biggest celestial neighbor, it makes sense that it would have a large impact on people if there is an impact to be had. But again, the skeptics have something to say about that, which we'll get to. But my favorite segment, because it contained the most information I had no clue about, is from a Dr. Russell Foster at Oxford University, a neuroscientist. So let's roll what he had to say and some of the research that went along with that, because I really am fascinated by it. In a 2008 study performed by Dr. Russell Foster, an Oxford University neuroscience and the director of the Nuffield Laboratory of Ophthalmology, he said that it seems absurd that the month you are born or conceived can affect your future life chances. However, Foster then lists 24 different health disorders connected to season of birth. Being born in the spring, summer, fall, or winter significantly changes your chances of having schizophrenia, multiple sclerosis, sleep disorders, type 1 diabetes, bipolar disorder, and allergies.
A study by the Office for National Statistics revealed that the month a person is born appears to indicate the statistical likelihood of what job a person will end up with. Researchers have also uncovered that the month in which babies are born has an effect on everything from intelligence to length of life. It seems absurd the month in which you were born can affect your life chances, says Dr. Foster. But how long you live, how tall you are, how well you do at school, your body mass index as an adult, your morning versus evening preference, and how likely you are to develop a range of diseases are all correlated to some extent with the time of year in which you emerge from the womb. Clearly, this doctor was not a Sagittarius or Leo.
Why's that?
Because he said nothing about sexuality and the zodiac signs.
Right.
And, the romantic compatibility between the zodiac signs.
That's true.
That can't be ignored when you're talking about astrology or zodiac types.
You were telling me that's why a lot of people start looking into it to begin with, to see who they're compatible with and who they should be looking for.
Yeah, definitely. Like, for instance, and I don't know because I've, haven't really messed around with Scorpios a lot, but they say Leo and Scorpio are very incompatible because of their intensity, very equal intensity. But I've even seen that to be true. For instance, I'll just throw it all out here in the air. I'm a Leo, and I do match the sexual energy of my type. I really do. Whether any of this is true or not, I do. They say Leos are very free, very passionate, and very hedonistic in the way that they love romantically. And it's very true for me. And I've been with other types. I would say like Cancers, Capricorns, who tend to be a little more grounded, a little more reasonable and in the middle when it comes to sex. And I've been to other, and romance, and been with other types that were really cold emotionally. So, yeah, I mean, that's a really important aspect too, I think.
The sexuality part aside, but relationship part, I'll comment on, because I, again, knew nothing about any of this, and neither did Beth when we got married.
Yeah.
But as it turns out, because she is, what is it? It's a Virgo, what was the other one you said?
Virgo, Libra, Cusp. Yeah.
And I'm a Capricorn, and Capricorn is like what the Virgo should have a relationship with, apparently. And we have a great relationship. So, I don't know. Maybe there's something to it.
I think there is.
Even pushing all, and I'm sorry, he didn't bring up the sexual side, but even with that aside.
That's the best part, man.
Well, you're right. I mean, I get it. That's why a lot of people get into it, because you hear them talking about relationships. They're interested in relationships.
That's the that's the funniest part about it. That was the second reason I got into it. First part about it was, okay, this is interesting, psychological personality archetypes based on their zodiac signs. And I was like, hey, wait a minute,
What this made me think, though, with all of these effects, when you're born affects the chances of you having these different disorders. It affects how long you're going to live. It affects the kind of job you're going to end up in. Statistically significant. So it's a very significant, something you can't dismiss because it's been repeated over so many people. That has to mean something. Now, again, I go back to the fact, even if it has nothing to do with the stars, and the skeptic in me says, it's not related to the stars, it's something else. But that doesn't mean that the observations are incorrect.
It still doesn't negate it.
Yeah, just because the origin is wrong, like their explanation for why it's this thing or that thing is mistaken, but the observation, well, if you were born in January, you tend to act like this. That's not necessarily wrong. And now we have neuroscientists, and not just Dr. Foster. There was another one, and I don't know how to say his name, so I'm just call him Chris. We're just
going to call him Chris.
I'm just going to call him Chris. He's a neuroscientist currently working as a postdoctoral fellow at Brown University, another very acclaimed university. Says the same thing. We know that there's this weird connection between seasonal birth and certain disorders, but we don't know why. People born January through March more likely to have schizophrenia. Seasonal affective disorder more common in people born in March and April. Alcohol abuse more common from March through July. Autism March through August. Bipolar disorder January through April. Down syndrome June through August. And Dr. Foster says that it could be changes in your mother's physiology based on the time you're born.
That makes sense.
Yep.
That makes sense.
And so even if,
why not?
In India, where they're very big into astrology, even if the cause they think is making these things happen, when they choose who they're going to marry or the job they're going to take or who they're going to vote for, even if the cause is wrong, if the observations are correct, that doesn't mean that it's not beneficial to the individual if it proves true.
Well, another thing I was thinking of, too, while you were reading it.
Sure.
Magnetic fields. Aren't there changes? And this is me, coming back with that bullshit again. But isn't there changes in magnetic fields during different seasons, different times of the year as it rotates?
Yes, because the Earth does not spin directly, you think a ball spinning perfectly. No, it wobbles a little bit, and that does affect magnetic fields. And the skeptics, again, have a little something to say about that and the effect of the moon and the planets and things on people's physiology that we'll get into. But there is a measurable change and a measurable effect. So it's not nothing.
Yeah.
The last thing, and we didn't do a segment on it because it's not really enough to do a segment on it, that I saw people who believe in astrology were saying goes back to the psi experimenter effect from our first episode.
Right.
That the person who believes in it will go and look into more detail
Yeah.
in their life, and they'll dig into it with more detail than a skeptic would. A skeptic will open, I'm so old, the newspaper, because that's where that's where I first ever saw it, was in a newspaper as a teenager. They'll see what their horoscope is or whatever, and they'll laugh, oh, ha, ha, that's so generic, blah, blah, blah. But we interviewed someone who made some excellent points about why you can't just stop there, and why that's why most people get it wrong. So let's see what she has to say, and then we'll talk about the merits of that before we get into the skeptical side.
All right, so we have a special guest on the show. We'd like to thank Carice for being here. And she's going to be talking to us a little bit of astrology and birth charts. So first off, Carice, what got you into astrology?
Well, I didn't get into astrology until much later in life, maybe about like my mid-20s. This is because I was raised in a very conservative Christian household. So the only thing that I knew about my sign was that it represented a crab growing up. But I never looked up any information about it because I was afraid like Satan was going to attack me through the computer for looking up my sign. So, and that was a very real fear that I had growing up until later on. I'm like, you know what? Let me see what my sign says about me. And I noticed that most of the things that it said about Cancer was true, except that I have a very adventurous side. So I started looking deeper into the zodiac. So here I am today.
Yeah, so regarding that, you said that there was an important aspect that people tend to miss about it. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. Most people, when they read their horoscope or they read about their sign, their sun sign, they feel like it's not true. This could apply to anyone. So most people, they just only get the general idea of astrology, but they don't go deeper into it. Most people don't know that you actually contain all 12 planets within you. So when you read one sign, you're mostly reading your sun sign. And for the most part, it does largely affect your personality and behaviors, but there's other signs that also affect your behaviors in certain situations.
Okay, all right. So you're saying that basically somebody reading about their sun sign is really, only getting the surface information.
That is correct. So the sun is the ego. You have a moon sign, which is your emotions. You have a Mercury sign, which is how you communicate. You have a Venus sign, which is how you love. And you have a Mars sign, which is your anger, sex, passion, drive. There's also, you have Jupiter, you have Saturn, you have Pluto, you have Chiron, you have Ceres, which are comets. So you have pretty much all the celestial bodies within you, and each one represents a certain part or a certain aspect of your life or your behavior pattern.
Okay, now, so for this segment, we got John with us, and Carice is going to be going over our birth charts, telling us how accurate they are. And so we're going to go ahead and start with me.
Okay, so your sun is in Leo. Your moon is in Scorpio. Your Mercury is in Virgo. Your Venus is in Virgo, and your Mars is in Leo as well. What's interesting about your chart, though, is that there are things called decans. So although your sun is in Leo, you're actually a second decan Leo, which means that you act like the next fire sign in the order of signs. So the next fire sign would be Sagittarius. So you have a strong sun placement, which is, Leo represents the sun. So that is a very powerful, powerful placement for the sun to be in. But your Leo acts like a Sagittarius a little bit. So that's the part that most people miss. Your moon is in Scorpio. Scorpio are very secretive people, and you are a first decan Scorpio. So you're like the most Scorpio of the Scorpio in your moon sign. They are very giving, very generous people, but they don't trust very many people. So they prefer to keep their circle small. And this fights with your sun because your sun loves people. They love to be around people. They love to entertain. So you have like an inner battle going on within you. Like you don't want to be around people, but then like you do. Mercury is in Virgo. You are a very concrete communicator. You speak exact, like what you say is what you mean. There's no guessing, well, what did he mean by this? You're very concrete, you're very clear, and you're very precise. You like to have all the facts before you make a response to something, which is very helpful. It helps you stay out of trouble. Your Venus is in Virgo, so that means that you are a very practical person when it comes to love as well. You're not going to choose someone that won't benefit your life in some way, and you hope to benefit that person's life as well. That's what love means to you. It means a partnership. You're in it for the long haul, so you don't really play around too much. But I mean, who's totally innocent anyway? But typically, you're looking for the long haul. Now, your Leo Mars, and this is a 0-degree Leo Mars, so that means your Leo acts like a Leo in this placement. This is Mars is anger, passion, sex, drive, all of that. So when you get angry, you get explosive in terms of like a lion roaring. Like you can get loud. But Leo people are very big-hearted people, so they don't actually like to get loud, but they will. Like if they feel like something is unjust, something is unfair, they will not hesitate to speak on it. So does that describe you at all?
Well, Carice, wow. I think that was very accurate, to be honest. It actually described a few things about me that I don't tell other people. So a little eerie, yes.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely secretive, private. You do like people, but you're also introverted, so it's kind of a love-hate thing.
Yeah.
But you are fast and loose on the relationship side, though. So I don't know that part, not so much. But all the rest definitely describes the Diasis that I know, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Okay. I do have an ultimate goal, though, regarding relationships.
Oh, that's true. That is a good point, because you have said that.
That a lot of people don't know about.
Yeah. You are looking for the longer term. You just haven't found it yet. So I can see how that could fit in.
That's true.
Okay. Well, it's my turn now. So what you got on me?
Okay. So for you, John, you are a Capricorn. That is your sun sign. So I'm pretty sure you read a lot about Capricorns. But you are also a second decan Capricorn. So you act like the next earth sign in the rotation, which is Taurus. So you behave more like a Taurus than you do a Capricorn. Capricorns are very, very protective of themselves. They don't give up more than they have to. Like, they are good at poker. They have like the amazing poker face. You will not know if you broke a Capricorn's heart ever. They will never admit it. They'd rather die first. But you behave more like a Taurus. So there is an influence on Venus on your sign, because Taurus is ruled by the planet Venus. So I want to say you have both Saturn and Venus at play. So Saturn is all about restriction and self-preservation. It's the ant and the grasshopper and the ant story. They're always thinking about the future, moving up ahead in life and the next step. This is actually a pretty good sun sign to be in, because you're a very hard worker. Because Taurus is at play too, you kind of have your days where you take it easy, but you don't really allow yourself too much time to take it easy. Scorpio, you're a moon in Scorpio too. Wow. That's probably why you guys get along and almost butt heads a little bit. I actually read up a little bit about Moon and Scorpio just now, and obsession can be a problem for you both. You can obsess over things, you can obsess over people. It's because once you tie your emotions into something, it becomes all that you want to think about, all that you want to try to move forward to in terms of goals. It could be in terms of relationship. It could be turned in terms of anything, whatever it is that, you tie your heart to. But just be careful not to hold on too tightly to things. Some things are meant to be let go of. Okay. Mercury and Capricorn. So just like the Aces, you guys, this is an earth sign. Just like the Aces is a Virgo and Mercury, you guys speak in very concrete terms. Not much can be, you try to speak with as little misunderstanding as possible. You want to be clear, you want to be concise, you just want to get to the point. This is what it is, and you'll give people the rundown on whatever it is that they're asking. Venus in Pisces. Oh boy. So that Venus in Pisces is a very dreamy, very optimistic love sign. So when you do fall in love, you become in this dreamy state almost, and you actually, you're sensitive towards all mankind. It's not just sensitive towards your partner, like you're sensitive towards everyone. Like you care, you have a very big heart. I can't read what I wrote. Appreciate running away. I don't know what I wrote here. I can't read my own handwriting. You're unimpressed by status, and you will love and accept whoever that it is that you're with for everything that they are, whether the good, the bad, and the ugly. You are elusive and you are playful. So it is hard to get you, but once you're caught, and that's where you're gonna stay. Capricorn and Mars, you are very, very slow to anger. You don't get angry quickly at all. But once you do get angry, you become cold. Like you don't want to talk. You don't want to see this person's face. Like you don't want to see them at all because like you're afraid of what you might say in retaliation of your anger. So very slow to anger, but once you're angry, watch out, stay out of his way. And that is all that I have for John right now.
Wow.
Well, I think it's safe to say that that was pretty much dead on for me. I didn't spot anything. In fact, it wasn't too long ago that I had the very thing she was talking about, that once somebody makes me angry, I don't want to talk to them anymore. I have told that to people. I'm like, look, I need to stop talking to you right now because I'm very angry and you don't want to hear what I have to say. I've actually told people this. So I get it, and of course everybody knows I'm wildly in love with my wife, Beth.
Yeah. No, I mean, that is interesting. I mean, there's a lot of things that I don't know about you that I've heard. I don't know if they're true or not. You say they are. But it's funny because I've joked about this off camera before about you, about how our anger styles are completely different. And they are.
Yeah.
They are. Yeah. I'm all passion and rage, and you are, okay.
Very slow.
See ya.
Yeah.
When you finally get there.
Yeah.
When you finally get there. Wow.
It's true. And what she said about status is very true because I have no interest in status.
I know.
Yeah, you were looking at me when she was talking about that. Yeah,
everything. No
interest. But John. I do, once I'm into something, I'm into it 1,000%. And that's absolutely true about me.
Yeah. That's that moon in Scorpio.
Mm-hmm. I definitely do not jump around projects quickly. And I have been in situations where I needed to realize it was time to let something go, but I didn't want to because once I'm in something, I don't want to let go. So pretty much everything she said was accurate for me. So that's pretty impressive, I think.
That's cool. Thank you for being on the show, Carice. Very insightful.
You're welcome. I'm glad that we were finally able to meet and get this, get this done.
Very great. Very cool. So again, thank you very much, Carice, and we appreciate it. And I've got some newfound respect, I think.
Yeah, I think I do too.
Yeah. You see, this is why I like to have people on the show who actually have some experience with the things that we're talking about, because I feel like you get a deeper understanding, or at least a deeper perspective on whatever the subject matter is on both sides. When I go online to research, and research is good, don't get me wrong, but what you tend to get is very much one side or the other, either the super believers or the super skeptics. But the problem is that the super believers never look at what the skeptics have to say, and the skeptics focus only on the comments or the statements that are the most ridiculous as a rule.
Right. And
they don't really give it a fair shake, in my opinion, on either side. What do you think?
No, I think that's so true. And yeah, I mean, great observation. The skeptics will find the most erroneous statements. The believers will find the most substantiated statements. And then somewhere in the middle of that, somewhere in between, you probably have some pretty good objectively verifiable proof,
right,
or good evidence, somewhere in the middle of that.
Right. I do tend to agree. This is our 4th episode now, and so far, for every episode, each of the subjects we've covered, the truth, or at least what seems to be the most subjective truth, lies somewhere in the middle. Now, we both lean a little in one direction or the other based on our personal worldviews, but it doesn't seem like too many people are really interested in being completely objective on either side.
That's the hard part.
Yeah. And that's the hole we're
Most
trying to fill.
people don't do that.
They don't. We're trying to fill that hole in the show by giving both sides a fair shake and discussing them put together.
Yeah.
And what conclusion do we arrive at?
Yeah.
And with that in mind, let's get into what the skeptics have to say about astrology, because they have a lot to say about it.
Yeah.
The first thing they say is that following the end of the 19th century, the wide-scale adoption of the scientific method, which required repeatable, verifiable evidence in order to say something was objectively true, astrology started to get challenged because it would fail, both in theoretical and on experimental grounds. And so astrology lost its academic standing in most places of the world, not India. And the belief in it has declined. So now we got 25% of Americans who believe pretty strongly, but in the past it was a much greater number, because it was like today someone not believing in physics. In the past, well, of course, it's been proven. People believed in astrology the same way we believe in anything, medicine or physics or meteorology. That one's kind of iffy, that kind of thing. Yeah. So that's the first thing they say, because the scientific method has proven that astrology is not verifiable. They don't accept it as anything but pseudoscience.
Yeah, and I think at best it's a lot like older sciences like phrenology or even sociology, Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, where at best they are generalizations.
Yeah.
It's not the type of pinpointed, almost completely tested, tried and true, verifiable type of stuff that you would see in a lot of other things in science that are proven. At best, to be fair to the skeptics, it's a lot of generalizing. It's a lot of generalizations and stereotypes, which would mean encompassing the general,
Yeah, I get what you're saying, that it's kind of a fuzzy system to begin with. You're not dealing with something like that's math. It's not math.
It's not math.
This plus that always equals this. It's fuzzier than that.
And, again, to be fair to the skeptics, and I am somewhat of a believer in astrology, so, don't get me wrong here, but to be fair to the skeptics, you do see signs or people born under certain zodiac signs that match their sign. And then to be completely fair to the skeptics, you see some that don't act anything like what their sign says they're supposed to act like.
That's a good segue into the next point that the skeptics make. There's something that's called the Barnum effect, which that ought to tell you it's coming out of a pretty serious skeptic, because it's named after Barnum T. Bailey, the circus guy. It shows how much respect skeptics have for astrology. They call it the Barnum effect, and basically it's a psychological phenomenon where individuals give high accuracy ratings to descriptions of their personality that are supposedly tailored to them, but are in fact vague and general enough to apply to a lot of people. So the idea being that when you read the description of your sign,
right,
there's going to be included in your description a lot of things that do in fact apply to you, but then they apply to almost everybody. To some degree. And so you're going to see,
That's what the skeptics always say.
Right.
They're like, you can stretch this to fit anybody.
Yeah, my sign is honest. I'm an honest person. Everybody thinks they're honest. And so, it must be accurate. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's a fair assessment. And so sometimes, and which leads into the next one.
But Leos are badass, and that is true. Okay.
Well,
and sexy, cute, and smart, and really intelligent.
And that, viewers, is called confirmation bias, which is the next point. That
science.
We see what we want to see. You want to be a Leo because the Leo is the sexy, wild, whatever guy, and that's who you want to be. And so you're going to look for the ways in which you match that sign in order to say, look, see, it's true.
Even try to live up to it. Yeah.
Yeah, but we tend to ignore the things that don't apply to what we want to believe. So, like, we celebrate the hits and we dismiss the misses. And so we end up thinking, yeah, my sign's totally accurate. When really, no, maybe it was half, but you like the half that was, and you ignore the half that you don't like. So that's confirmation.
I don't know what you're talking about.
That's what they say. Now, when it comes to the moon and the tides, there was a livescience.com article that made a very interesting point on the skeptic side about that. They said it requires an enormous amount of water to make a measurable difference. And they gave the example of even the Great Lakes, their tides never exceed 2 inches. The Great Lakes are massive, but in comparison to an ocean, it's very small. So their tides are tiny because it requires a much larger body of water to see a real significant effect. To the point that
that's amazing.
The minuscule amount of water our body contains, it's affected, immeasurably so, but it's so tiny that as to have, in their opinion, no real effect at all.
Maybe.
To the point where researchers have calculated that a mother holding her baby exerts 12 million times the tide-raising force on the child than the moon does.
Oh,
simply by virtue of being closer.
You know how big the moon is?
They did the math. I'm saying based on the math.
It's like bigger than Earth, man.
Yes, but if you, it's not bigger. Don't say stuff like that on the show. The moon is a very large body. That is true. It is a very close celestial neighbor in celestial terms, but in real terms, it's very, very far away from us. So even though it does have a measurable effect and affects very large bodies of water like oceans.
Say, yeah. I mean, look at tidal waves.
Yes, but a mother is right next to the baby. And so her comparative size actually affects a much greater force on the child than the moon would affect on the child. That's what the skeptic says. Now, the devil's advocate in me says, okay, that may be true, but if they've admitted, and they do, that there is a measurable effect, however small, where's the science or the evidence that shows that that very small measurable effect has no impact on the individual, especially given the studies that we talked about in the segment on the moon that show that the moon does impact people's sleep patterns in a very real, statistically significant way.
Yeah.
So maybe, that one I would give it a maybe.
Yeah.
I see what they're saying, but I'm a little on it. What do you think?
I'm wondering, I'm still thinking about the whole tidal wave thing and the Great Lakes. I didn't know that about the Great Lakes. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I wonder if bodies of water closer to, the poles, I mean, are they farther away from the moon? I mean, I don't again, here I go again. But doesn't the moon rotate around the equator?
No.
Okay. I knew that. Just kidding.
But still, I get the point you're saying.
Because you see the tidal waves and stuff in more tropical waters.
The Earth is round, so therefore each body of water isn't the same distance from the moon because there is a difference. From the shape of the Earth. Would it have a different effect?
Yeah.
But how would that play a role in the effect of the moon on the person? Are you saying that, you think that maybe someone closer to the moon physically, let's say when the moon is near the equator and the equator that's would it have more of an impact?
In my scientific opinion.
No, that's actually interesting. It makes me wonder, if you measured the effect on sleep.
Right.
On the kids, not just all over the world, but in places and during the time of year when they were actually closer to the moon, would it have more of an impact on their sleep?
Exactly.
Schedule.
Is someone, and again, I'm just totally hypothesizing.
It's a good question.
Is someone sleeping during a full moon affected more if they're closer versus someone who's farther away? You know?
That's an interesting question. And nothing I saw actually looked into that. They were just looking at the full moon in general, I think, because the purpose...
Yeah, does distance matter, basically?
Yeah, and really, if you think about
distance a factor?
The amount of change in distance from one place on the Earth to another is a tiny, tiny fraction of the total distance. So even though, of course, it probably has some kind of effect, is it enough of effect to be significant? And that's, I don't know.
That's what the skeptics are,
I don't know
basically.
if that's true
It's
or
not enough to play a role in our behavior and personality.
But we can't really know that unless it's tested. And as far as I could find... that specific question has never been tested. So it's a good question. I don't know.
So it's still up in the air.
Yeah, maybe somebody knows.
Yeah.
If you're one of those people, give us that information. Now, there have been experiments done to test astrology. And there was one famous one done in 1985. It was published in Nature, skeptical, famous magazine.
Yep, I've seen it.
It included 28 astrologers who were asked to match over 100 natal charts to psychological profiles that were generated by the California Psychological Inventory Questionnaire. It was a double-blind experimental protocol, so there wasn't any way for anyone to, accidentally get tricked into the right answers here.
Right.
This is double-blind. They had two groups, and there was the placebo, right? So, effectively placebo. Both sides agreed upon the protocol, the astrologers and the people who were studying it. And the study showed that the predictions based on natal astrology were no better than chance. And that the testing clearly refutes...
That's not true. Where'd you get this
The
stuff?
astrological hypothesis. This was in Nature in 1985.
It was that inaccurate, or they considered it that inaccurate that they said it's flip of a coin.
Yeah, it's flip of a coin. Like what the astrologer said could have been flip of a coin, guessed right or wrong. They weren't right any more of the time.
So they weren't blown away by the accuracy of it, basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah, they said there was no accuracy better than someone just guessing. That's what they said. Another one. Dean, a scientist and former astrologer, and a psychologist, Ivan Kelly, conducted a large-scale scientific test that involved more than 100 cognitive, behavioral, physical, and other variables and found no support for astrology. Like what astrology said would be true for those people wasn't any better than chance.
Interesting.
Meta-analysis pulled 40 studies that involved 700 astrologers and over 1,000 birth charts. 10 of the tests, which involved 300 participants, had the astrologers pick the correct chart interpretation out of a number of others that were not astrologically correct, usually 3 to 5 others. When date and other obvious clues were removed, no significant results suggested there was any preferred chart.
See, I'm going to have to pull a U here. I want to see numbers on this. I want statistics, because that is interesting.
Yeah, it is.
And like I said, I mean, even for me, as someone who leans more towards believing it, that is one of the things that does kind of make me still in the neutral here. Because it's like we were talking about off camera. It's accurate enough, or there's enough of coincidences,
right? Well. Correlation,
to not completely wipe it off the table, but at the same time, it's still hit and miss enough that it's not really, I don't know, I think it stays in the gray area for a lot of us.
Yeah.
And I'm still somewhat gray about it.
Now, astrologers would like to believe that this is not a belief, like this is a scientific, provable, testable system.
Right.
And this isn't like you pray to God and something happens and hell will say I have faith. No, this isn't supposed to be
Boom,
faith-based.
here's $1 million.
It's supposed to be science. But the fact that the results have not been able to be repeated under testing in this way makes skeptics believe it's just a pseudoscience, which means it's not really based in anything that has shown to have any valid, repeatable results.
Yeah.
But then you make a good point, though. We don't know I didn't see the details of the test. What exactly were they looking for? But if the astrologers agreed on the protocol in that first one,
lies and propaganda. People.
And then we've got the birth differences now, and I've already stated something to this effect regarding the effects on a person's chances of getting various diseases, what they're going to be when they grow older, lifespan, all of those things that have been shown by neuroscientists to have real effects based on when you were born. One thing that Dr. Foster said, he was talking about how sunlight triggers the production of vitamin D in the body, and that lack of this in the first months of life may have long-lasting effects. So he said, I'm not giving a voice to astrology, it's nonsense, but we are not immune to seasonal interference. So even if it has nothing to do with the stars, like astrology and the whole system they've come up with, even if that's just baloney, that doesn't mean that the time of year we're born does not have a real and significant effect on what happens in our lives. So as I've already said, the observations may be true, even if what you believe the cause is not.
I could see that, because there's still a lot of things we don't know. Still a lot. Like you said earlier, what was that? You said something.
Today's science is tomorrow's joke.
Yeah.
And that's true.
You do see that a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of things that were taken seriously and established back then, we look at now and they're so damn antiquated. It's just like, how could anyone have ever taken that seriously?
Yeah. And I will give you an example of that that's recently in the science headlines that I follow. Is for a very long time, there have believed to be 4 fundamental forces in the universe. There is the electromagnetic force, there's gravity, there's the weak nuclear force, and there's the strong nuclear force. But in 2016, and repeated again this year, are studies that indicate, or seem to indicate, time will tell as they try to repeat it, that there may be a 5th fundamental force that nobody had any clue was even there.
The 5th element.
Yeah, that's good. The 5th element. That would totally change the way physicists and astronomers had to look at various things. And one of the guys, to give him snaps, who was reviewing the study, he said, look, if there's a 5th, how do we know there's not a 6th, a 7th, a 20th? And if there are forces that we do not yet understand because you don't know what you don't know, we have no clue what may be affecting us on a day-to-day basis, but as of now has not been able to be measured because it hasn't been observed in laboratory conditions, but that doesn't mean it's not there.
Right. I mean, you said it earlier, and I totally agree with it. We don't know what we don't know. So we don't even know what to look for or not look for, what we don't know what to look for or not look for.
That's why.
So we can't even build the equipment to even know what to build it for yet.
Yeah. I always err on the side of agnosticism, not in relation to God, though I am an agnostic in that way, but in relation to just science and anything. That there's so many things we don't know that it would be hubris for me. It would just be the height of egotism to claim that I know anything absolutely. I have reason to believe the things that I believe based on my evidence and observation and the science and things like that, but to completely dismiss anything, it's to ignore the fact that you don't know everything. And so I try not to do that to people or their beliefs or whatever.
I mean, that seems
Plus,
balanced.
It's just kind of shitty.
I was going to say, it's kind of arrogant, really.
It is.
Kind of
arrogant,
an asshole if you do that.
Let people be.
In my opinion, at least.
If they want to believe, let them believe. As long as they're not hurting anybody, let them read their horoscope. Damn it! I mean, they're not. So what?
That's right. Leos are the best. It's just a truth.
Yeah. All right. The last point that skeptics make, and it's a good one. Astrology is based on the belief that the sun and all of the stars revolve around the Earth, which we know is not the case.
Do we?
Don't start with that.
Don't come back with that.
And they gave an example of a comment made by Elizabeth Tessier, French astrologer, who claim that the sun ends up in the same place in the sky on the same date each year as the basis for believing that two people with the same birthday but a number of years apart should be under the same planetary influence. But the reality is it's not true. There's a difference of about 22,000 miles between Earth's location on any specific date and two successive years. And that they are not under the same influence just because they were born on the same day. And over a 40-year period, there's a difference greater than 780,000 miles. So when you say, oh, well, it's because they're born on the same date, the same astronomy is affecting them, astrological influence, that's not true. That shit's moved a lot.
Well, see, that's why they act different sometimes. Yeah. There you go.
So there's that. And skeptics point to that, and that's why they say that it's pseudoscience. But back in the day when it was considered science, people did believe that the sun and all the stars revolved around the earth. That was the understanding of the day. But then what science believes...
We were narcissistic, basically.
But what science believes today, 100 years from now, may be laughed at or looked back on in the same way that we now look back on people believing...
It's very true.
That the sun and all the stars revolved around the earth.
That's true. I mean, we're still learning every day.
Yeah.
And even learning new things that invalidate the old things all the time. Mm-hmm. So things that stood for 100 years, hundreds of years, we start finding out after we really observe them with new equipment or new ideas, new theories, weren't exactly what we thought they were.
Yeah. That fifth force of the universe that may have been discovered, we don't know how much more of that stuff's going to happen in the future.
Hopefully she's a hot babe like the one in the movie. That's one hell
great movie
of a Fifth Element.
Yeah, everything about the movie was fantastic.
I love it.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
All right, well, that is what we have for today, and I definitely, although I'm not convinced that astrology is scientifically accurate or anything like that, I was very glad we did this because I had no clue that there was such a heavy impact on people's lives based on when they're born, even if the stars got nothing to do with it. And that's very fascinating to me.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. Yeah. I had never really thought about that aspect of it, but I mean, it makes sense. Why not?
Yep. So whatever the cause really is, when you were born has been shown to have an effect on what your life's going to be like going forward. So maybe pay a little bit of attention to it.
Yeah. Read your horoscope. Read about Leos because they're the best.
But you have to do what our interviewee was talking about, though, and go into more detail, right? If you're going to believe something, you dig into it. You just read your daily horoscope. It's probably not going to be
it's a little more complex than that.
A little bit. All right, everybody. Well, if you like this video, be sure to click like. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the notification icon so when we release new videos, you will be notified. And as always, thank you very much for watching our show.